Test your reality. What you talking about? Hi, this is Rick Julian, author of The Way, and today we are going to talk about the way to test your reality. Test your reality. What you talking about? I mean, look, there are cars driving by out there. There are people walking down that path, and there's a bicyclist. He has on a red shirt, and the sun is shining, and those leaves are green on that tree. That is reality, right? We don't need to do a lot of testing. It is what it is. We can both observe that. All right. Yeah, I'll agree that all those things that we just pointed out are, in fact, real. But they're real at the level of appearance. And that isn't all there is to reality. That isn't all there is to our perception. An equally important component of our perception and our reality is the prism through which we interpret that visual layer of reality. That prism is filtered through our emotions, our memories, and our associations. And those two things combined, the appearance of things and the way we interpret them, is the full picture of reality. It gets a bit more complicated with our physiology and, how well our eyes work or our ears work or all, perceptual stuff at the level of our hardware comes into play as well. But fundamentally, there's the way things look and the way and the way we feel about the way things look. So in The Way, in verse 13, I get a lot of questions about this line, your world is your imagination. What I'm speaking about is this filtered component of our perception of reality, that imagination component, and how it becomes as real to the way we experience our existence and our lives as the way things actually look. So let's give some examples. The first one, let's look at this painting on the wall behind me. Now, we could both agree that there are two primary colors in use. There's a green field, a green background, and then there's a red animal of some sort, right? And that animal has its arms up and it's holding, maybe a flower, yeah? We can agree on that. I'll shake hands with you on that. But I think that you and I are certain to think about these elements very differently, about that painting very differently. For you, it may seem a bit crude and childish. And in fact, it is very childish because it was drawn by my son when he was in the first grade. And for me, it is not crude. It is impressive to me that he was able to do that at that age. It is full of emotional associations for me. It's joy, it's happiness, reminds me of his beauty, of the beauty of his spirit, and the happiness that he has, and the satisfaction it brings to me that I have a child who at that age was so happy that he could produce something like this. So your sense of this painting and my sense of this painting are very, very different. In many respects, we're not even looking at the same painting because you lack all of this emotional information that I have. So you're looking at only half the picture. You're looking at the visual layer, and I have this other half, all of these associations. So I have a more complete understanding of that. Let's do another example because I think this is a very, very important concept to have before we move on to an actual protocol for how we test reality. Here is a shell, and this has been on my desk for years. Again, at the layer of its physicality, we can agree that this shell has a conical shape. It tapers from wide to narrow. It has these various segments on it. Its colors are brown and white. It has a certain kind of glossiness about it. It has this opening. It is white on the inside. I mean, we could go through all of these various attributes, and again, you and I could shake hands and say we agree on the reality of that shell at its level, at the level of its being a physical object. But let's plug in this other component of it. This shell was gathered during a trip to Destin, Florida, when I was a child. It's one of many shells that I gathered from many summers spent in Destin with my mother and my father. Even as I think about them now, I'm flooded with lots of beautiful memories of those trips during my childhood. I think about the sugar white sand beaches. I think about the beautiful aqua colored water. I think about the unexpected encounters with friends and playing on the beach and swimming in the water, of getting lost every once in a while, of getting in a little bit of trouble for not being where I said I was supposed to be, et cetera, et cetera. Food, of colors, of people I met. All of those things are a very rich set of associations that I have with this shell, and they are overwhelmingly positive, and they are memories that I enjoy revisiting, and it's one of the reasons I have this on my desk, because in an instant, if I want to, I can go back to that place in my memory, and it's pleasing to me. For someone else, that shell may trigger a whole different set of associations that are very sad. For someone else, during a trip to the beach during their childhood, they may have been walking along the beach, collecting shells with their little brother, and really enjoying themselves and making good memories. And then the little brother may have spied a ball floating out in the water off the shore some distance, and excitedly ran into the water and started to swim toward that ball to retrieve it, only to get caught up in a riptide and to be swept away in that tide and then drown. This person who witnessed that would be traumatized, as we all would be. And for the rest of that person's life, seeing a shell would bring back the painful memories of that. Seeing this very same shell that I see, that brings all this wonderful stuff back to my mind, brings pain and regret and sorrow to this other person's mind. This exact same shell. So this is the fullness of reality. It is this two things merging together, appearance and association. And that's a very important thing for us to keep in mind as we go into this protocol that I'm about to describe. I was introduced to this protocol a few years ago. The woman who I first learned it from is Byron Katie, and a very, very wise woman. She didn't originally author this. I was talking with a friend, and as I was describing these 4 questions that I'll share with you, he said, "Oh, that's really powerful stuff, but it reminds me of some from some Stoicism readings that I have done over the course of my life." And as we discussed it more, I said, "Yeah, I can see that." It also reminds me of some of Viktor Frankl's thinking, particularly from Man's Search for Meaning. So I won't say that she innovated this, but she did a brilliant job of distilling it and clarifying it, which is very, very important, because simplicity and clarity makes wisdom more socializable. It makes it easier to socialize, to share it with others, and to spread it among others. So that brief caveat. There are 4 questions that she has that are part of a process for how to test reality. And it is most valuable when used in the context of dealing with memories, beliefs, and understandings of events that bring us pain, that create turmoil in us. We all have these things, things that we just aren't able to let go of. Something that someone said years ago. It's amazing that we can carry things around from childhood, early childhood, when someone said this one thing and it wounded us, and we've never forgotten it. It always hurts when we revisit that idea, that memory. Experiences, all of those things, all of us share some of those things in our lives. And they often bring us pain that we would like to release from our lives. I just can't get over this thing I've heard friends say to me, or I have heard myself say to other people. Well, here's a way for us to test the reality of these beliefs and of these perceptions, and in order to give us a grip on them and to evaluate whether or not they're worth keeping around, or whether or not we can let them go, or perhaps reinterpret them in a way that is less painful and less traumatic for us. The first question is it true, this belief, this thought that you are having, that you've been, memory that you've been holding on to? Is it true? Well, I was there. I saw it happen. It happened to me. This person said something to me. I know the exact words. I've repeated them 10,000 times in my mind. Yes, it is true. Why would I want to believe it if it weren't true? This is the default response that most people have to the first question. Yes, it's true. Question 2. Are you absolutely certain it is true? Look, I was there. I felt it. I heard the words. I saw the expression. I saw the words come out of their mouth. I see their face clear as day. I've replayed this thing 100,000 times, and yes, it is true. I'm certain. I mean, what's certainty? 100% certainty? I mean, I've made mistakes before. Yeah. I mean, I'm not perfect. My perception isn't perfect. I maybe my memory isn't absolutely perfect. I mean, it's possible that there's another way to look at this. Maybe I said something that provoked this person into saying this, and if I put myself in their shoes, then it's possible that there could be another interpretation to this. All right, I'll grant you that. I'm not perfect. Man, you've introduced a little bit of doubt into my mind now. I mean, I had this interpretation. I had this memory, this belief. I had put it in a room. I'd closed the door. I'd hooked the chain. I'd put all the deadbolts locked on it. And that's where it was. That's what it always was. And every time I thought about it, I thought about it in the same way, and it was true. Now you're making me think about this. I've had to unlock those locks and withdraw that chain and open the door a little bit and let a little light into that room. Okay, I'll play along. I'm not absolutely certain. I'm not absolutely certain that it's true. Okay? Question 3. How do you feel? What do you think when you revisit this thought, this memory, this belief? How does it make you feel? What do you think about? Well, I think about it feels terrible. They said something that was really mean and hurtful to me. And I think I've never really forgiven them for it. But I mean, who says stuff like that to people, right? I mean, what kind of person says stuff? That's what I think. What kind of person says something like that to someone? Why would they want to hurt me? I've been nothing but good and kind and generous to them. And yet they did this thing to me that I've held on to for so long. I think it was bad. I think they were, I mean, I'm still in a relationship with this person, so I mean, they're not a terrible person, but in that moment, they were very mean, and I think they may have tried to hurt me intentionally. I think it's very possible that they tried to hurt me. Yeah, that's what I think. That's what I feel. I mean, that's what I always did feel. It's now that we're beginning to talk about it, and you've introduced a little bit of doubt into my certainty, and I'm wondering if all of these feelings and all of these and what I've been thinking is 100% justified. I mean, if it isn't true, completely true, in the way that I've always believed it to be, it's starting to make me feel a little bit different. I'm having to think through this idea that, I mean, what if I put myself in their shoes? I mean, you know, this didn't happen just on one side. I mean, there were like two of us there, and maybe they were feeling something. I mean, you know, maybe they were having a bad day, and I just happened to catch them at the wrong time, and they were a little short of temper, and if I'd known that at the time, maybe I would have written it off and not taking it so seriously or so personally, or maybe, all right, I mean, now that I think about it, they were complaining and they said something very mean to me about something that they had mentioned before. I'll admit that I have a habit of doing something that could be annoying to this person, if I'm honest. Maybe this was the straw that broke the camel's back. Maybe they'd just been kind of holding, you know, biting their tongue for all of those years, and then they just had enough, and they lashed out, and they hurt my feelings because their feelings had been hurt. And you know, the more I think about it, you know, I kind of do that same thing to other people too. I mean, they may not have said anything about it or responded in quite the way that this person did, but yeah, I probably do that to other people, and I wonder. I wonder if I was annoying to them, or if I was hurtful to them, and they just never ever said anything because they didn't want to rock the boat or push back on me. So now you've got me. Now you got me thinking. Question 4. Where would you be? What kind of person might you be without this thought? Without this belief? Without this interpretation of the memory as you've been carrying along for the last 10 years? What kind of person would I be without it? Well, I feel like you're towing me out into some deep water now. I came in certain or believing something was true. Now you've introduced doubt. Now you have made me think about the feelings that I have and how I've always thought about this. And now you're asking me what would I be without it? Well, if I hadn't had this belief, this interpretation of this experience and this memory, maybe I wouldn't have been so resentful for all these years toward this person. Maybe I wouldn't have been so guarded. I mean, after this happened, I put up a wall, and I would, to protect myself, to protect my heart, because, back then I was open-hearted. I felt I was more open-hearted and more trusting, and look what they did. They took advantage of that, and they hurt me. So I put up this wall to protect myself, and if I didn't believe this, that wall wouldn't be up. And if that wall weren't up, maybe our relationship would be more trusting and deeper and more loving. Man, this belief it's really cost me a lot. I've never let go of something that I wasn't even certain of. The opportunity cost of what could have happened in a positive version of this, that opportunity cost has been pretty high. But we're not done yet. The next part of this exercise, beyond these 4 steps, gets even more powerful for me. This may be the most powerful part of this whole exercise. And we're going to turn this belief, this memory around to its opposite. We're going to invert it. What if the opposite of this belief were true? What if instead of trying to hurt me and wound me with these words, to belittle me, what if they were actually being loving toward me? And they were trying to teach me something that was for my good, for that relationship, but also with my relationships with everyone. What if the opposite were true? And what if that love just didn't look like love at the moment, but it was actually a loving thing? What if it was true? I mean, I admitted that I had this habit of doing things, and I could see that might be annoying and hurtful in its own way. And what if by kind of blowing up and really calling this thing to my attention, it snapped me into an awareness that I had never had about the damage that behavior actually is causing in my life and in my relationships. And that it was actually a loving thing to point that out, because I was doing that damage in a lot of places around my life and hurting other people, even though I may not have been aware of it. And that if I stopped doing that to other people, maybe it would make my life better, my relationships better. And maybe that thing that they said brought me to this moment of awareness that I'm having 10 years later. And that if I accept it as being true, and I'm willing to let go of this old interpretation and turn it around and think about it as being a loving gesture, even if it didn't look like it at the time or feel like it at the time, they felt comfortable enough and they cared enough for me to say it and to tell me the truth. Hmm. And now that I think about it, you know, what they said was actually true. I mean, maybe that's why it stung so much, was because what they said was actually true. I was wrong for being that way. And I just never wanted to accept it. Maybe I was just a little bit selfish and thought that my jokes or my however that behavior manifested itself, maybe it hurts a few feelings here and there, but I like saying it. I like being that way. But to hear it criticized, I didn't like hearing that. So those are the 4 primary steps, and then this very powerful way of turning it around in the end. And this can be applied to so many things in our lives. We tend to want to orient this practice toward things that bring us the most pain. If it's interesting to you, I recommend that you move slowly through this. Pick one thing and only one thing, a belief that you've always held, an interpretation of a memory, an interaction that has always brought you pain and has ended up affecting your relationship with others, maybe your relationship with yourself. Maybe it always made you feel badly about yourself. And go through these questions. Be alone. Set out some time, because this is pretty profound work to really go through it. And further, I think it's even more profound if you write it down. Write down the questions and write down your answers. Because writing requires a level of commitment to the thought. It makes us think a little bit deeper before we want to commit it to paper. And then once it's committed to paper, then it has a reality that isn't quite there when it's just stuck in our heads or in our words. It becomes a real thing at a different level. And look at it and read it and take time with it. I think it will be a profound experience for you. I have seen this profoundly affect not only my own way of perceiving painful things in my life, but I've certainly seen it happen in other people's lives many, many times as well. I think it's also important for you to be willing to forgive yourself. It happens very often, especially once we get into the turnaround phase, that it really hits us in a very heavy way, that it wasn't that person's fault, that all of these things that I had been blaming on this person, I may have been very wrong about it. And further, I may have been personally responsible for triggering this entire event based on something that I had been doing. That this reaction that I perceived in them was based on my own action, that I initiated this without knowing it. And then when you have this awareness that it wasn't limited to this experience and this relationship, and that maybe I have been doing this thing all along for a very long time to a lot of people who just weren't quite as sensitive, or perhaps not as invested in me enough to take the risk to respond in the strong way that this other person did. And forgive yourself. Forgive yourself. You did the best that you could with the awareness that you possessed and the tools that you had to work with at that time. And maybe now that you have some new tools and some new awarenesses and some ways to work through your perception of things, you'll be better at it. So take it easy on yourself. This is heavy work. I will make no pretense about it. This is heavy work, but it's very, very important work. And the lightness that comes through the release of this pain and of these beliefs that we've carried around for years and years and years sometimes, letting them go, releasing ourselves from their burden is beautiful and is a gift that you can give to yourself initially and to others as well. And if you feel so inspired at the end of one of these sessions with yourself to acknowledge your own responsibility and to reach out to this other person and say, hey, I just want to tell you that thing that you said to me 10 years ago had produced this effect in my life. And I'd always held on to this interpretation of it. And I think it deeply affected our relationship. It deeply affected the way I interacted with other people. And I just wanted to apologize. And I hope you'll forgive me. That will close the circle. You have gone full circle then. From this misperception to a realistic test of that, a version of it that has been reality tested and landed you at a place that is completely different than where you were. And then based on this new awareness that you have gone back to the source of that memory and made amends by apologizing, you have disempowered this event, those words, that memory. And once you have done that, tell me about the lightness of that feeling, the exhale of release from that burden. It's a beautiful thing, and I wish it for you. After you've done it once, you can move on. I'm sure the list is not exactly short. It's never been short for me. There are a whole host of things that I have been working on myself. So that's one of the most powerful ways that I know to test reality. And I hope it's helpful for you. And I wish you the best as you work through it. Peace.